Hi, so I am teaching third grade right now, and I would like to unwrap the standard for IELTS 3.1 and IELTS 3.3. So, 3.1 is about ask and answer questions to demonstrate understanding of a text, referring explicitly to the text as the basis for the answers. IELTS 3.3 is describe the characters in the story, like the character traits, their motivations or feelings, and explain how their actions contribute to the sequences of the events. So to do that, we chose the book of The Tale of Desperate, and we have studied it as a whole class during our read aloud session. And after about a couple of lessons, we will talk about the story arc. We will talk about the exposition, who are the characters and what is the setting. Talk about the problem, like what goes wrong in the story. In the Tale of Desperate, it is that he is not a normal mouse. He is very abnormal as a mouse. And we will have a rising action. For example, like the problem getting worse. In this case, he fell in love with the princess and also amongst other things. We will have the climax, which is what is the turning point. We will have falling action, how is the problem getting better, and the resolution, how is the problem solved. So first, after we have read about 10 to 15 chapters of the story, for the Tale of Desperate, there's 52 chapters in total. So in order to actually understand the rising action and the problem, we will really need to get into the story first. So 10 to 15 chapters is required. So for exposition, the students will understand who the characters are and what the setting is. For the problem, they would know that Despero is not a normal mouse. They would be able to tell from the actions of the others and the words and the thoughts of what Despero is having. We were digging to rising action where students will understand how is the problem getting worse. So when they see who are the characters in the setting, how is the problem getting worse, and what goes wrong in the stories, like the subtext of exposition, rising action, climax, they will understand. Oh, okay. For exposition, it means that who are the characters in the setting. They will need to write down the characters in the setting. For problem, they will need to write down what goes wrong in the story. For resolution, for example, they will need to know that means that how the problem is getting solved. So from doing that, for the students to know that, we printed out a packet. This is part of their activity for actual lessons. For when we are talking about exposition in the Despero, they will need to write down the characters. They will need to write down the setting. They will need to know that the text-based details they will understand that the text-based details in the book tells them the story is based on once upon a time it's in a castle, the kingdom of Dor. We would later on dig into the problem, the rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. So my goal for this lesson is that by the end of the Tale of Desperate, the the students will fully comprehend the story arc, the story elements, which is exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution, and also the problem. By the end of the lesson, 90% of the students will fully comprehend the story arc, and they will be capable of creating a story arc based on the Tale of Desperate by themselves. This is the fourth quarter of third grade, which is like almost the end of the academic year. So they should be able to fully comprehend the elements of a fairy tale. So the big idea is for students to really, really get into reading and for them to understand that fairy tales can have a lot of different ways of interpretation. It doesn't just end, it doesn't just have 20 or 30 pages. Chapter books can also be fairy tales. After the Tale of Desperate, we would move on to Edward Tulane, which is by the same author, and we will also be discussing the same standards and also the big ideas. So we are doing character studies on how and the observations, how can the observations become ideas? For example, once readers have met a new character, they need to think back to their observations and ask, what does this tell me about this character? The skills that the students will be having is the collaboration and also communication and critical thinking. By having collaboration and communication, we do a lot of group discussions. So to have by having the group discussion, the students should be able to know how they can talk to their friends with kindness, with respectfulness, instead of just being shouted at each other, instead of shouted at each other. And to have critical thinking is that they are able to form their opinions about the book, the tale of this role, or they're able to form their thoughts on what they think this role's character traits is or the problem is. We have a lot of different assessments, for example, the story maps. We created posters of story maps about the tale of this world, talking about the sequence of events, what happened first, and then what, and then what. The students will also have group discussions where I would be walking side by side with them, observing them table by table, to see whether each student will be able to verbally express their ideas on the tale of this role and our discussing questions. We would also create character notes. So students will be taking notes when we have introduced new characters. This is particularly a great exercise in the tale of this role because there's so many different kinds of characters. And so the students will write down the characters' details, how they enter the scene and what their motives and actions are in the scene. It will be a bit like character sketches, but without the drawing. And then the objective is for the student to be able to identify the main characters in the book. In this case, not Matilda, sorry. In this case, will be the tale of Despereaux. Um, in the end of the lesson, this is about 5 to 6 or a bit more lessons. Students will be able to tell me the story arc that this is basically what my lesson is based on. The story arc, the exposition in the tale of this role. The setting is based on um the castle's wall, and the characters is gonna be Despereaux's parents, his brother, and the friends that he met along the way. We also talked about supporting characters role. So there's three supporting characters role, which is the teacher, the friend, and the challenger. And so in this case, Gregory, the jailer, is the friend and also the teacher. The challenger is the rats in the Tale of Death role. So we talked about how supporting characters can have more than one role. He can be either a teacher or a teacher and a friend, or he could be a teacher and a challenger because the challenger can also teach the main character things.